You know, I think this, a lot of the fear of religious involvement in the civil order, what John Richard Newhouse called the naked public square. He wrote a whole book on this. That being that people, there are movements in the United States, I think, that misinterpret the Constitution and say that we need to basically sanitize the public, the commonweal, from any religious expression. I think that's a misconception of the American founding, just as a historical point of fact, in addition to its cultural growth. The advocates of that position, groups like the American Society for the Separation of Church and State, to a very great extent the ACLU, but now more and more you see it in academe, you see it in public expressions of all kinds. The great phobia is being judged. And I think we need to get over that phobia. I understand that if a person says unpleasant things to you, and the way in which they say it, I think, is really the key, that it's not nice. But I'm not willing to sacrifice a sense of moral certitude, which isn't to say moral omniscience, but a certain sense of moral certitude. I'm not willing to sacrifice that for etiquette. I think we should be polite people, but not at the sacrifice of our identity and of our morals. Now, if I were to go back to the gospel and I see, Jesus, although he's come in for direct attack in recent days too, but generally he's been exempt. They make a distinction between modern Christians and Jesus, and in many respects that's justifiable because we fail so often. But Jesus has this encounter with a woman caught in the act of adultery. In John, I think it's the 8th or the 9th chapter. And it's very intriguing to follow that dialogue that he has with this woman. I don't know if you know the story, but Jesus comes to this Samaritan town, and the writer of the gospel is obviously having to fill in certain presuppositions that his audience may not know. The Jews don't get along with the Samaritans, and there's kind of this separation. And this woman comes up to him, and it says it's at noon. And she's going to draw water from the well. Well, Jesus is sitting there at the well. He sends his disciples to get some supplies. He's sitting there, Jewish rabbi. This woman comes to get water. And he says, give me something to drink. And she says, you're a Jew, and I'm a Samaritan, and you're asking for me to give you something to drink? Because the Jews were not allowed to drink from the vessels. They wouldn't have anything to do with Samaritans. And then ensues this interesting conversation with her. And he says to her, go get your husband. And she says to him, I don't have a husband. And Jesus says to her, you've spoken the truth. The fact is you've had 5 husbands, and the man you're living with now is not your husband. You've spoken the truth. How's that for judgment? But there's something in his manner, in the way he converses with her, that intrigues her rather than offends her. So much so she becomes his convert, and then she goes back into the town and tells everybody about who he is. Now it's interesting, by the way, sub thing, as you're reading this, you realize, what's this woman doing out there alone at noon drawing water? You don't draw water at noon in this hot Palestinian weather. Those 5 husbands she had were the other women who would have been at the water well at 6 in the morning. And she didn't want to see them. She was avoiding them. Christ knew this and confronted her with something. I think what people are saying about judgment is that they don't like people who are haughty, hypocritical, nasty, unkind, and don't have their best interests at heart. The best gifts that I have ever received in my life have come from the truth that people have spoken to me at the right time, in the right place, in the right manner, and with the right relationship about the disorder of my life that helped me to rectify those things. So I think that there's far too high a premium placed on being non-judgmental. I think it's not whether we make judgments or not. We all make judgments. We have to make judgments to survive. The question is whether we make judgments with the right motives, with the right integration, with the right love, and with a sense of tolerance. Because if I judge you, I need to be prepared that you don't accept my judgment. And that's tolerance. So I think we could live a lot better and a lot more authentically, a lot more holistically, if we approach things this way, rather than getting all bothered about somebody doesn't like my lifestyle. You know, let somebody not like your lifestyle and listen to one another and talk it through for whatever conclusions people will come to at the end of the day.
You mentioned natural law.
Yes.
It's a concept that my students have a very hard time understanding, and perhaps I don't explain it well. Could you help me?